Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something that is literally hiding in plain sight. We're going to uncover the strict metrics and massive data frameworks that quietly run the entire global oil and gas industry.
I want you to visualize something for a second. The next time you're at your local gas station filling up your car, just stop and ask yourself, have you ever really thought about the massive global chain of events that actually ends right there at the nozzle? I mean, that fuel didn't just magically appear, right? It went through an incredibly complex and highly regulated journey. And more importantly for us today, how do we actually grade the companies responsible for that journey on their safety and sustainability? To make sense of all this, we're going to break things down into 4 key pillars. Number 1, the downstream value chain. 2, measuring planetary impact. 3, protecting people and communities. And 4, future fuels and governance. Let's get into it. Pillar 1, the downstream value chain, defining those final stages. Okay, so the oil and gas sector is absolutely massive, so we need to put a fence around exactly what we're looking at. We are laser focused on the final stages, which break down into 3 core operations. Step 1 is refining petroleum, basically taking the raw materials and processing them. Step 2 is marketing those oil and gas products to the world. And Step 3 is operating the actual gas stations themselves. Together, these 3 steps make up the exact scope of what's known as the refining and marketing, or R&M sector. The crucial takeaway here is that term, downstream operations. These are literally the final operations of the whole oil and gas value chain. But what's really fascinating is that the environmental and social impacts of these operations, they are definitely not all the same. Their complexity, how much money they need to spend, and their overall intensity depend heavily on the specific types of crude oil inputs they're using and the exact mix of products they're trying to push out of the refinery. Now, to measure all of this, we aren't just making educated guesses. We're relying on the SASB standards, which are now managed by the International Sustainability Standards Board, or ISSB. Think of these standards as our ultimate grading rubric. They give us highly specific, industry-based guidance so companies can disclose sustainability risks and opportunities that actually hit their bottom line, stuff that affects their cash flows and cost of capital. This is the exact framework we are using today to measure this sector's massive footprint. Moving on to Pillar 2, measuring planetary impact, specifically looking at emissions, water, and waste. What's super interesting here is that we aren't just talking about your standard greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide. Refineries actually generate a ton of non-greenhouse gas air emissions from combustion, flares, and equipment leaks, and these carry very real, localized health risks. We're tracking things like oxides of nitrogen and sulfur, particulate matter under 10 micrometers, hydrogen sulfide, and volatile organic compounds. Monitoring these exact pollutants in metric tons is absolutely critical. Why? Well, because these standards require companies to disclose how many of their refineries are located right near urbanized areas, meaning densely developed places with over 50,000 people. Beyond the air we breathe, there's water, and refineries use massive, massive quantities of it. There is a really critical distinction here between water withdrawn and water consumed. Withdrawn is what they pull out of surface or ground sources. Consumed is what actually evaporates or gets permanently incorporated into the products themselves. So why does that exact distinction matter so much? Because these companies have to track the precise percentage of these activities happening in regions with high or extremely high baseline water stress. Basically, areas where water is already incredibly scarce. It's a huge operational risk and, frankly, a community risk too. Bringing it back to your local gas station for a minute, we have to talk about what's actually beneath the pavement you're standing on. Underground storage tanks, or USTs. The definition here is highly specific. It's a tank with 10% or more of its volume sitting below the surface. The industry has to track the number of active tanks, the closed ones, and crucially, any releases that force a cleanup. This strict tracking is what helps mitigate the major risk of groundwater contamination from leaks, spills, or corrosion. Which brings us to Pillar 3, protecting people and communities, focusing on safety and critical incidents. In downstream operations, you are dealing with highly flammable, incredibly volatile substances and process fluids at just extreme temperatures and pressures. So workforce safety is incredibly high stakes. Consider the number 200,000. It sounds completely arbitrary, right? But it's actually the foundational constant used across the entire industry to calculate safety rates, like the total recordable incident rate, or TIIR. Here's the math. It represents the total number of hours that 100 full-time workers working 40 hours a week for 50 weeks a year provide annually. By taking incident counts, multiplying by 200,000, and then dividing by the total hours worked, companies get a standardized rate to track injuries, illnesses, and fatalities. And that applies to both direct and contract employees, no matter how big or small the company is.
But what happens when things go wrong with the actual processing equipment? The industry tracks something called a loss of primary containment, basically an unplanned release of material. Looking at the different incident tiers really shows the scale of this risk management. A Tier 1 process safety event is a big deal, a greater consequence event. We're talking a potential employee fatality, an officially declared community evacuation, or a fire resulting in over $100,000 in direct costs. On the flip side, a Tier 2 event is of lesser consequence. It might involve a recordable injury or a fire with just $2,500 in direct costs. But make no mistake, both are strictly measured and reported.
The thing is, the industry doesn't just sit around measuring disasters after they happen. They track proactive safety metrics to stop them from happening at all. Tier 3 measures challenges to safety systems. These are your near misses, demands on the safety systems that didn't quite cross the line into a Tier 1 or 2 event, but definitely had the potential to. Then there's Tier 4, operating discipline. These are the leading proactive measures. We're talking equipment maintenance, timely inspections, comprehensive workforce training. It is all about building a really rigorous, deeply embedded culture of safety so you never lose primary containment in the first place. All right, our final pillar, number 4, future fuels and governance and the pivot ahead.
The legal and regulatory environment around all this is changing incredibly fast. One major way these traditional downstream operations are adapting to survive is by looking way beyond traditional fossil fuels to advanced biofuels. Now, these are strictly defined as biofuels, specifically excluding cornstarch ethanol, that boast a 50% lower life cycle greenhouse gas emission rate compared to standard gasoline. Downstream companies are literally being graded right now on their total addressable market and their market share for these advanced biofuels and all the infrastructure that goes with them. Investing heavily in these clean fuel blends is exactly how these companies are trying to ensure they stay compliant and competitive for the long haul.
And, it's not just about what they sell, it's about exactly how they sell it. Governance is a huge piece of these SASB standards. Beyond environmental impact and physical safety, these entities absolutely have to maintain pricing integrity. They are strictly required to disclose the total monetary losses from any legal proceedings associated with price gouging, price fixing, or price manipulation. Regulatory agencies are watching everything, from product supply decisions to reported price indexes, just to make sure consumers are protected from unfair pricing practices.
Which brings us to the end of our structural journey today. And I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative question to chew on. How exactly will the massive rise of advanced biofuels and the absolute explosion of electric vehicles force this traditional downstream value chain to evolve its metrics over the next decade? I mean, the grading rubric we explored today is rigorous, but it's going to have to adapt as the very nature of that gas station pump completely transforms. I really hope this explainer fundamentally changed how you look at your next transaction at the pump, knowing there's a massive chain of standardized data and safety protocols behind every single drop. Thanks so much for learning with us, and stay focused.